So today, welcome, by the way. Today we will talk about DDI, so Decentralized Digital Identity. And we will give a primer and the current landscape on where it's at and why it's important, and go a little bit into behind the curtain and the architecture of digital identity. So we can share a little bit more light of what Marie just laid the foundation for. Let me introduce me. So my name is Björn Obermeier. I'm part of Accenture. I'm within our Metaverse Continuum business group and lead our Web3 and digital ownership endeavors. For the last 10 years, I was doing blockchain for enterprise purposes. And throughout this journey, it became evident that a digital society needs digital identity, and there's a lot of wallets, there's a lot of custody, there's verifiable credentials, and there's a lot of things in this general area, which brought me to working with very closely as well here in Bratislava with the team to build wallets and on the endeavor on digital identity. Today, I'm joined by one of my teammates, Hakan.
Hello, everyone. Oh, great. You can hear me. So, yeah, my name is Hakan, and I'm working with Björn in Björn's team for the digital ownership and Web3. I'm specializing in decentralized digital identities and have been working on diverse national and international projects related to decentralized digital identities. And furthermore, I'm also a researcher and published some scientific papers about it as well. You can find all about them if you're interested in it on ResearchGate.
Thank you, Hakan. So as said, we want to speak a little bit about digital decentralized identity, why it matters, and I want to first work a little bit on the language to lay the foundation when we go a little bit deeper into architecture. So I guess each and everybody of you have seen this website, right? So a couple of months ago, we have provided our personal identity information. First name, last name, what else? Email address, company name, job title. We did that to actually get a one-time credential to visit this conference today. Anyone in the room who did not do that? Okay, good. It was just a sanity check, whether or not this actually worked. In this example, the event staff here issued me that credential. I'm the holder of this credential by this very pass. And this morning, they verified that I actually created and put all this information in by the individual QR code that everybody was receiving. Again, a one-time credential for this event, valid only today. Next year, probably this credential is not valid anymore. This is just one example. So I wanted to tell a little bit of story of why I think it's important, the daily interaction that we have with, different kind of credentials, information that is shared. And I want to use the journey that I had getting here. I'm coming from Munich, Germany, to here. It's not far, it's 5 hours, you would think. But my journey started yesterday with renting a car. In order to get the car, I had to make a reservation with the car agency. In order to reserve the car, I had to create an account first, or actually I had an account, but I stored all my data. I gave them my driver license, I gave them my Netflix password, everything they wanted to know, right? When I entered to the driver license, to the rental car company, I wanted to see my reservation, that I have a valid reservation, that checked it up in their system. I wanted to see my driver license, whether I still have an active driver license, and I kind of verified by the picture that's on that driver license, and if it's remotely looking how I am looking like, right? And supposedly, while I still have access to this driver license, they do think, it is still active. I didn't do anything wrong. They can still use it and can still trust me with their car. As well, membership cards, of course, that's part of the system. I entered my data so they can verify, it's me. I get all the points and can do very cool things with it. And then a credit card so that I actually have a token that I can pay, or they have proof that I can pay for this car. Then I was going on like that to the airport. At the airport, of course, you need to show your ticket, the QR code. I showed my loyalty card because I want to collect points. And again, I had to create an account with the airline and have multiple loyalty cards. I looked at it and I wanted to verify that's actually me by looking at my citizen ID card. Right? So they looked at the picture, they look whether it's still valid or how long it's valid. And you know that, when you travel internationally, you need to see that your passport is valid in order to actually go through the gate and get to where you want to go. Then when arriving in Vienna, I took a train. Taking a train is very anonymous. You go to a vending machine, you get a ticket, you pay with whatever means of money you have, or, and get a ticket. You go places, full stop, no account created. Very easy, very convenient. Then I got into the hotel. Again, it's the fourth time I'm attending Open Slava. It's the fourth time I'm staying at the same hotel. Yet again, they wanted to see my same credential. They wanted to see whether my address details have changed or not. I had to sign again that, yes, I'm still Mr. Björn Obermeier. Yes, I'm still living here. Yes, this is still my credit card. Yes, this is still my stuff. And they wanted to see my citizen ID card. They wanted to see everything that supposedly they know, right? In the end, of course, they knew. I was very much surprised that they didn't want to see my credit card because the account team paid for it. So that was very nice. And then lastly, coming here, I showed the QR code in order to receive dispatch and the lunch voucher in order to get some food. So they can actually authenticate and verify that it is me. Now, I think we've all had these experiences and we have this day in, day out, I guess. And this is just a simple example. But what I want to say is that every time in every interaction with every of these entities, they all have their own database. They all store the stuff, at their premises. They basically own your identity data. And I do remember in my old company, I had some accounts with some hotels, and I just wanted to change things. So they were sending me emails to my old working email address to reset my account, which is impossible. Or whenever you have like two-factor authentication with an SNS number, you change the cell phone number. Sometimes it's really impossible to get this all changed because it's all stored in like local databases, right? And what this creates is basically a lot of silos, right? So the information stays basically in the systems of record with each and every entity here. And anytime there is a change, you basically have to go and look up, oh, I need to change my address here. I have the billing address here, and you have a new cell phone number there, an email. So the experience is not quite the best, right? I mean, I think we all got used to it. And last year when I was speaking, I looked at my password manager and had like 150 accounts that I use day in, day out. I looked it up yesterday. I'm at like 180 accounts, and I think it's only growing the more digital service that we are consuming. Now, what's as well a challenging piece is there's a lot of leakage, right? You may have seen that recently. Yet another hotel chain, was attacked and they leaked information. There's a lot of personal information that is stored in these systems, and they need to do everything to be compliant with GDPR as well. So it is hard to make everything right? And, it's my personal data. I don't know what they do with my data. I still have to trust that they do the right thing. Now, the amount of credentials that I shared just in this simple trip, like 13 different credential types. Right? Some were like really easy, some were like, citizen ID cards or credit cards, some were physical, some were digital. That's not really the point, but it's like 13 credentials for one trip. And this, it's like 4 different points of interaction. And only 2 of these credentials were identical. My citizen ID and my credit card were the only 2 that were identical. The other ones were all different. They were all registered with these different entities in different flavors and shapes, and it is cumbersome. Right? So why is it that it's that cumbersome? Basically, the identity models that we've used in this example yesterday from coming there to here is hinging on 2 different models and alluding to what Marie said before. There's a centralized and a federated identity model that we've used. A centralized identity model is basically where you have an organization with an identity provider, and you go there, you create an account, you get all your data in, and they store everything. And the trust is between the identity provider and that very organization, right? Like if you created a bank account or for the rental car company. And then there's a federated identity model. I have not used that in my travels here, but it could have been something like a social login using your Facebook, your Google. And I don't want to use my Google account to actually get a plane ticket, because I don't trust Google necessarily with my personal information. But a federated identity model is somewhat better because it's a little bit more seamless, because the trust is in a one-on-one relationship between the identity provider and the various organizations that they have an association with. I guess you've all used it. When you want to use one of these federated identity providers, it is asking you permission to share your date of birth, your whatever it is, right? You give actually consent to do that. Yet all your data is still with that identity provider, and you have to trust them doing the right thing. So what if there was a way to achieve the very same, better user experience in a way more seamless fashion? What if instead of me being like 5 different persons at all these steps, in this journey, what if I could be one person, right? And to the example that was used previously, what would be if I could stream pieces of identity information on demand, like only streaming, when they need to know the date of birth in a specific circumstance at that time, I can just stream it like from my fingerprint, if you will. And this is where, we can stream it going forward with decentralized digital identity using identity wallets. Plus on top, you get free biometrics, which is an additional security layer. In order to achieve that, we speak about decentralized digital identity, and you can see here that you as an holder are in that model in full control of your personal identity information. And the trust is between the issuer and the verifier using a verifiable data registry or multiple registries. I'm trying to lay the foundation here for Hakan to dive into a little bit more of an architecture of how this really works in the backend. With that, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Björn. So, as Björn mentioned, we're going to be diving a bit deeper into how decentralized digital identities work and how a high-level architecture can be depicted. And so the entire journey of decentralized digital identities between the issuer, holder, and verifier and the lifecycle of credentials can be depicted in 4 architectural layers. The first and foremost, that we have the issuer and application integration, where these applications, issuer application, holder application, and verifier applications are stored. And they are also connected or integrated to the backend services, for example, of an issuer, so they can fetch the data related to the identity subject and issue a credential using the application. Similarly, holders have their application as a smartphone wallet, which has been integrated into smartphones, whereas the verifiers, they also have integration through their backend, so they can offer goods and services using the verifiable credentials. So these applications, issuer, holder, and verifier, their sole purpose is to communicate with each other, exchange credential, or authenticate authorized people. And for that reason, we have one layer below the credentialing. And here we are looking into, first of all, the interaction that is happening between the issuer and the holder, issuance of a verifiable credential, which is a tamper-proof container that contains claims or information about the identity subject themselves. For example, name, last name, date of birth. Those are all claims that can be stored in a verifiable credential. And this verifiable credential is also digitally signed by the issuer. That's going to be important in a later stage why it is signed, but we're going to get there in a second. And if you're looking into, we have verifiable credentials that has been signed, and the holder gets this credential and stores it in their wallet. In a certain next level, they would go and present it to a verifier to get access to goods and services. And there we are looking into a verifiable presentation. And the difference between a verifiable credential and a presentation, you can see it that way. If I'm having an ID card, for example, you can think this of as a verifiable credential because this has been issued by a state organization and it looks very authentic. However, when I'm presenting it physically to another entity, and seeing me as a person, they validate or they know that this credential really belongs to me because the picture on this ID is the same as my biometrics on my face. And therefore, there's a biometric binding of this identification to my person. And similarly, we can do these things using cryptographic binding so that only holder can use these verifiable credentials. Then as next, we do have credential exchange protocols. Like I mentioned, this issuance and verification happens also through a set of protocols. For example, let's say Björn is an issuer. I, as a holder, can go and say, hey, Björn, can you please issue me a credential? I would like to have a request.
Here you go.
Yeah, and then Björn says, I'm going to be offering you this. Are you okay with that? I can take a look and say, yep, I'm fine. Please issue me that. And then?
Okay, thank you.
And then he issues me the credential and I store it. And this is a protocol set of interactions that happens between an issuer and holder, but at a later stage also between a holder and a verifier. And finally, since these digital decentralized identities are stored within the domain of a holder and not within an identity provider anymore, if there is a necessity arises to invalidate a credential that has been already issued, for example, I losing my wallet or such, in that case, the issuers have to have a mean to invalidate these credentials. And therefore, we do also have credential revocation as a capability from the issuer side. All right. This credential exchange that we're mentioning is also happening through secure connections and communications. And this is occurring on a lower layer called the agent layer, which is a software that acts on behalf of you as a person. And they're responsible for secure communications that are happening between these entities. And also they are responsible for key management, since there's a lot of cryptographic signatures happening around, and also credential management, since there are many credentials that are being issued or also validated. And finally, we do have at the lowest layer, the verifiable data registries. So as you can see, we do not have any direct communication or trust between the verifier and the issuer. Instead, we have verifiable data registries in which the issuer registers the signing keys that they use it to sign the verifiable credentials, so that at a later stage, a verifier can fetch that public key and authenticate whether these credentials has been really issued by this issuer or not. In order to be able to get these public keys and other key information from a verifiable data registry, we have the verifiable identifiers, which we're going to get into in the next slide. And also in a verifiable data registry, there can also be some credential schemas that are being registered. Credential schema, you can imagine as like a example of an electronic identification. So a base credential that can be stored there, and it can be issued for people with field information at a later stage. And finally, we do have also a revocation registry if a revocation is also enabled. All right, so verifiable data registries. Like we mentioned, we are shifting the trust from identity providers to registries, but how do we know who to trust? In order to be able to get the public key for the verification, we need an identifier, because it is the identifier that resolves into a certificate that contains these public keys. And the most common identifiers are out there for the decentralized digital identities are the decentralized identifiers, short for DIDs or DIDs, and they resolve into a DID document. So the concept itself might sound a bit complex. However, it's actually quite simple. If you have a web browser and if you put openslava.sk and hit the enter button, it resolves into a web page and you get the contents of that web page. Similarly, you can have a decentralized identifier, and with a DID resolver, it resolves into a DID document. And it contains these information such as public keys and service endpoints. And there are a couple of mediums that you can use as a verifiable data registry. First and foremost, it doesn't look amazing here, but blockchain and distributed ledgers. Since decentralized digital identities are coming as a Web3 movement, the early stage implementations have been all about using the blockchain and distributed ledger as a medium. However, they also have a couple of pros and cons that come with it. First of all, they are highly available and persistent because the amount of nodes for a blockchain or DLT varies between 5 to tens of thousands, and therefore they are highly available, and the likelihood that none of them are going to be available or reachable is statistically zero. And they're also tamper evident, meaning that any data that has been stored there, and if you want to change that data, you will always be able to see what has been the previous state of that data due to audit trails or the tamper evidence property of a blockchain or a DLT. However, there are some cons of it as well. First and foremost, it's the governance, because when we are trusting a verifiable data registry, we're also trusting the governance of that verifiable data registry. However, if you are registering, or let's say Björn can go and use the Bitcoin registry and say, this is my public key and I am the Department of Motor Vehicles. And since there is no governance around the public permissionless blockchain such as a Bitcoin, he would be able to do so, and therefore the trust in that case would be very limited. However, there are exceptions to this rule because there are also highly specialized blockchain and DLT that is very, very suitable for using for decentralized digital identities, such as the European Blockchain Service Infrastructure or Hyperledger Indy solutions. Next, moving from a bit complex solution for a VDR to more simple, we have the web servers. And a web server, you can use a verifiable data registry. It is in the domain of one entity and in control of that entity. And it comes also with some pros as well. One of them being it's like very simple to use. Web servers have been there for decades. The control is on the owner of that web server. It can be the issuer themselves, or they can be sharing a web server with multiple issuers. And the data there is mutable. However, there are some cons here that you cannot see because it's, looking a bit weird. The data there is not tamper evident. In the current implementations of web servers as the verifiable data registries, if the issuer, for example, would change the public key, we wouldn't be able to see what was the state before, and therefore any credential that had been issued at a previous stage could not be authenticated. And finally, we do have the public key directories. And public key directories, you can manage, imagine it in such a way that many issuers or organizations can store their public keys or the related information to their public keys to a public key directory, which has been managed by a centralized institution. There are highly available, and their governance structures are very, very well made. And from the level of trust and security, they offer the highest level of trust and security. However, there are also some cons to it as well. One of them being the high entry barriers. In order to be able to register your public key in a public key directory, you will have to go through a lot of regulatory framework and be compliant with them. And finally, they also come with a con that with the danger of centralization. Okay, so I would like to take your attention to the right-hand side right now again, or your left, and with the public key and the service endpoint that I can get from a document. With these two information, I can enable a secure end-to-end communication with any other entity. And this has been done by an agent, which is a software that acts on your behalf. And here we do have two different or main different ways to do this. One of them is the peer-to-peer model. There's a communication that happens through the peer-to-peer protocols. It's called DITCOM, and it is secured through verifiable identifiers. Let's say Björn is an issuer, and I found his public key and his service endpoint from the verifiable data registry. With that information, I could actually write a message and say, "Hello, Björn. I'm Hakan, this is my public key, and this is my service endpoint." Sign that message, encrypt it with his public key, and send it to his endpoint, so he can only he can decrypt that message with his private key, read the information, and do the same thing, and therefore, voila, we will have an end-to-end secure communication with each other. This is a peer-to-peer model. And the other one that is also very predominant is the server-client model. And in the server-client model, the communication occurs through the RESTful APIs. It's based on the HTTP requests and responses, and this time it is secured through HTTPS and TLS. The similar stuff that I talked about, the public key cryptography, happens here as well, but in this case, we are using X509 certificates and session keys. So both approaches can fulfill the authenticity, integrity, and confidentiality properties of information security. They are authentic because the message is signed and they can check it. It's integral because if there's a tamperance, this would be evident. And it's confidential because only the recipient can decrypt the message themselves. However, how they are used or implemented are a bit different. So their properties on the peer-to-peer model, they are message-based. So each and every message is being signed, decrypted, and encrypted in a later stage, whereas the server-client model relies on a session-based communication. The peer-to-peer model is an asynchronous communication. So when I'm sending a message to Björn, for example, I'm not necessarily expecting a response. And even if Björn is not available at that time, he would be able to get that message at a later stage and respond to me at a later stage as well. Whereas this is not possible with the server-client model since it's a synchronous model. And if I won't be able to reach Björn at that point, I would have a connection timed out. And finally, the peer-to-peer model is transport agnostic. You can use HTTP, Bluetooth, NFC, or any other transport medium of your choice, whereas the server-client model is more reliant or inherently HTTP-based. Great. So now we have established trust and we can communicate with each other. The next step is credentialing. And here there are also a couple of different verifiable credentials that are out there. And when we're looking into it, there is one from the W3C verifiable credentials standardized by the World Wide Web Consortium. There are a couple of flavors to it as well. For example, JSON Web Token, which exists of a header, payload, and the signature. There is a JSON LD version of verifiable credentials where you can use context to add semantic disambiguity or add vocabulary and ontology to the credential itself. So when you're, for example, talking about name claim within a credential, that you can know that it is about a person and not necessarily about the car or a plant or an animal. And finally, they do have one more version. I mean, they have a bit more of flavors, but these are the ones that are more predominant. And the other ones being the selective disclosure for JSON Web Tokens, which enables being able to disclose a subset of claims. Let's say in my ID, there is name, last name, and date of birth. I have the capability to disclose only my date of birth with the verifier without breaking the integrity of the credential itself, which stands for the selective disclosure as a explanation. Next, we do have from Hyperledger Foundation standardized AnonCreds. As the name says, that stands for anonymous credentials, and they are highly privacy-preserving verifiable credential format. And last but not least, we do have mobile driver's license standardized by International Standards Organization, which is already in use in Canada and the state of California, where people can actually store their mobile driver's license in their Apple wallets, for example. And they offer different properties. Selective disclosure, we did talk about. Only capable credentials are SD-JOTs, AnonCreds, or verifiable credentials. Predicates is another property that can be offered by these verifiable credentials. It's the ability to derive a proof and make a statement, a Boolean statement, whether it's something true or false. For example, I could create a proof out of my date of birth to ensure that I'm about 21 or below 35 or something like that. And this is called predicate proofs, which AnonCreds are also here capable of. There are also some other properties as well, non-correlation, semantic disambiguity, but for the benefit of time, I think I'm going to be skipping them a bit. And similarly, we do have also, all right, thank you. We do have the credential exchange protocols. There are many other protocols as well, but predominantly we do have from the Hyperledger Foundation, the ARIS credential exchange protocols, and the other are coming from the OpenID Foundation, which are called OpenID for Verifiable Credentials Protocol family. And their main differentiation is The Aries credential exchange protocols rely on peer-to-peer communication, and authentication and communication also occur through the decentralized identifiers, whereas the OpenID protocols are using a server-client model, and the authentication authorization happens through the OAuth 2.0 framework. Okay, so I want to give you two framework examples that are out there. One of them is from Hyperledger Aries framework, which has been there by different names since 2016-17 and came from the industry. We do have from the application integrator side, again, three different applications, issue, holder, and verifier. From the credentialing side, they do support AnonCreds and JSON Web Tokens, also JSON LD credentials as verifiable credentials, and use Aries credential exchange protocols. Like I mentioned earlier before, they are relying on peer-to-peer communication on the agent layer, and from the verifiable data registries, blockchain DLT type of VDRs and web servers are supported. On the other hand, though, since early 2020s, there has been a movement for the citizen ID within the EU, European Union, and an extension of an existing framework or regulation called Electronic Identification Authentication Services, short IDAS. And here it has been extended, or it's in the status of being extended to support decentralized digital identities as a means of identification. And to be able to be technically compliant with it, they also released a framework called Architecture Reference Framework. And here in this framework, we do have, again, the three different roles. But here, one specific one is in the holder. There's an EU digital wallet, which is a more specialized application, which Katrina and Andrew is going to be talking a bit about at 3 o'clock. And from the credentialing side, if you want to be compliant with like a higher level of assurance, the verifiable credential supported formats are the ISO MDLs and verifiable credentials W3C selected disclosure for JSON Web Tokens. And they do use the OpenID for verifiable credential protocol family as credential exchange for the remote exchange. But if you're in the proximity, let's say Björn being the police officer and I need to show my driver's license, in that case, they use the protocol ISO IEC 1803-5 2021. This framework is based on server-client communication. And finally, as a verifiable data registry, a public key directory is used. The one specifically that is being used is the EU trusted list. All right, so I would like to finish our talk by saying that the decentralized digital identities are not a distant future. The technology itself has been out there since 2016. We as Accenture have been working on different projects since 2017, but only not working in the projects on the client side, but we've also been contributing to the open source community. We've been contributing also to the research in this area. So we are also at the forefront of this technology and innovation. If you're interested to know a bit more about the EU Digital Wallet and its current status, please join us listening to Katrina and Andy about it. And if you want to see a practical example of what I've been talking here about, you can also check the demo that is also going to start in the next 10 minutes or so. So, thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to read these loud this time.
Okay, so we have...
All right, the first question is, do you have real cases where this solution is used? How the adoption is going, and what is the plan for the closest future?
Yeah, I think some of the real solutions that you just talked about, for instance, the state of California and Canada using driver license already in their Apple Wallet, definitely a real use case. I think in Singapore as well, there is identity that's used in a mobile fashion. So there's a couple of states already using it. I think in Portugal, they have citizen ID and mobile driver license in their wallets. So countries are picking up on this.
Just wanted to extend it with what I heard from Andy yesterday is that the state of Bhutan with 600,000 people, they have enrolled citizen ID using this technology just recently, and now it's active and in use. So I'm reading the first one here, right?
Mm-hmm.
How probable, easy is it going to have open source wallets? So, do you want to take it?
I'm still unpacking this question. Yeah, I think there's going to be probably following standards. I hope there's going to be a variety of wallets that we can use in compliance with what the EU is saying. I think there will be wallets for multiple purposes. There will be wallets for iOS, for Android. I don't think personally there's not going to be one wallet to rule them all that's going to hold, all kind of things. There will be multiple wallets going forward. As a big fan and believer of open source contributions, and we do that as well. And I think it's evident in the Open Wallet Foundation, which is part of the Linux Foundation, where basically a lot of industry people are coming together to work exactly on how to release open source wallets so that everybody can benefit from that. So how easy? I think it's a way. You have to discuss a lot of things, but there's a lot of initiatives already going on to achieve exactly having open wallets on open source, so we can all use them.
Right. So, can holders decline credential revocation from issuer? No, they can't, because the revocation happens on a different level, and once it has been revoked, there is a proof that it has been revoked. However, revocation does not mean that a credential is completely invalid, but it has been revoked at a certain time. The credential that has been issued to you can still be validated according to its authenticity or integrity. However, the proof of non-revocation would be false in that case.
Oh, that's a long one.
In case of getting a document approval via biometric matching, what are some possible risks? Examples: twins using your ID, realistic masks, plastic surgery, etc. And how can such cases be avoidable?
Well, I think for one, you can have multiple factor authentication. Just using your biometrics is something you have, and combine that with something like a PIN code. I think in the some projects that we do at Accenture with our clients where we develop wallets, we exactly have the same principle, so that you cannot demask or just put a photo of someone else. So we really check for depth and 3D and liveness, and paired with a PIN code, so you can really make sure it's that specific individual that is trying to access some data or use some data. I think that's pretty much a standard. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.